Today I'm going to show you all a Korean, kind of like a springtime noodles recipe. But I wanted to share a story, a quick story with you guys first. So when I was 10 years old, my parents, my family moved from more of like an inner city type thing in Boston. And we moved to a town that was further out that was predominantly Caucasian, predominantly white. And I remember the first year that we were there, especially, where my brother and I, we would finish school, we would get off of the school bus, and it was like a group of kids, and they would throw rocks at us for no reason whatsoever. And now looking back at it as an adult, it's so like entirely screwed up. Like it, and I know like some people will say like, oh, it's just like kids being kids, but what horrible people and what kind of parents raise such a thing. But it wasn't just when we moved to this town. These things happen my whole life, where, you know, when you grow up as like an Asian or just somebody who looks different from, you know, your typical Caucasian mass. My whole life, I have gotten, you know, like we say, teased or like made fun of. People would, you know, like do the Asian eyes or say stuff like chong ching yin yang, whatever. Like things that, it makes me cringe now because I haven't had to deal with it for such a long time. But when I was younger, you train yourself to get used to those things. You train yourself when you get into a room or when you meet new people, new classmates or something, like you train yourself to understand that that is something that is likely to happen. And you train yourself to kind of like, you like laugh it off and you're like, oh yeah, like, ha ha ha, that's really funny. And what I noticed about me, especially in my younger years, was this thing that was happening impacted me subconsciously and maybe consciously in the way that I presented myself, in my body language, in like when I entered a room. I did not want to make like a scene. I did not want it to be known that I had entered, because the more attention that you attract to yourself, the more likely that something was going to happen. That it could have been just like embarrassing. It could like ruin your day. Like just things that I didn't like want to deal with. Like that was not a thing. I'd gotten very used to a certain way of people interacting with me, and so the way that I presented myself, it's fortunate on my part that I haven't really had to think about it for many years. And I say fortunate because like if I was black, that would be a different conversation. Like the fact that it's like, oh yeah, as I grew up, I kind of like grew out of being discriminated. Now when I walk the streets, you know, when I hear the stories of violence and vandalism, it's very crazy that I have to be aware that, okay, I look Asian, I look Chinese, and so that means that when certain people see you, they're more likely to react or do certain things in a certain way. And so I find myself, you know, it's so bizarre. I find myself worrying about these things again. I'm not surprised by it because I'm seeing these things happen in real time. And I'm seeing like the climate of things happen. And I think what gets me really upset is sometimes people are this way because those in power and those with money and politicians and have made normal people's lives so desperate that they're just scrounging by on, you know, like on pennies. Like, where am I going to get my next job? I work like 60 hours and I can't feed my family. And how about like healthcare? Like what happens if I get sick? Or like just everybody's hanging on by this really thin thread, and they get so desperate that anytime a scapegoat is presented, like any time that there is like a reason of this is why your life is like this is why you're so poor, this is why, whatever, that you're so desperate that you're like, yeah, that's true. And even if you weren't racist before, you're just like looking for someone who's responsible for why am I like this? Why is life so hard? On the same level, it becomes easier for people who are actually racist and that actually hate other people to spread that rhetoric and to be accepted and for that to be okay. And I think that is what people need to see.
I just want to make it clear that I am not excusing the perpetrators in any way. What they did was gross and disgusting. And no, I was not surprised at all when I saw how quickly the police were to say that this wasn't a racist issue and that somehow this was just some kind of an addiction, or how quickly the news was to show how close he was to his Baptist church and to draw out his character that way, when if you think the same about if it was a Black perpetrator, would that have ever happened? And so for sure, you can call the reason whatever you want, call it a sexual addiction, but when you see how a person behaves and acts and the types of things he is willing to do towards another human being, you start seeing how that person views the other people and the respect and their lack of for it.
For people who profit off of making people feel like they are separate and that they should be superior to this race and having people fight people. In San Francisco, I think that there were, Asian actors with good intentions that paid to say like, okay, if you can find the perpetrator, report it to the police, we'll give you a certain amount of money, or to bring more police to a certain area. And that's the thing is like, now you're pinning races against one another. As an Asian person, I very much know that we're in this together. Like, there is a common bad guy that we need to look out for. And I, as an Asian person, I don't want to be responsible for like, oh, we are the class that brought more police here so that next time there is a shooting of a Black person, that, now somehow the Asian community is involved in bringing all of that in. That is like, people are in things together. People need to look out for one another. And so I think my message is like, don't let other people separate you. There's a commonness in decency. There's a commonness in human. And to really look out for one another is going to be my main message in this video. Because you're either, one, a perpetrator, or two, you watch something bad happen and you don't do anything about it. Okay? And that just puts you with everything else. If you see something on the street, hear something on the street, see something in your community, either speak up or get involved in community groups. And to say like, that's not okay.